Hi, my name's David Gilson and I'm the Managing Director at College and County. I thought with our newsletter going out, this was a great opportunity to say hello and just to update you on what we've been doing here at College and County over the past sort of 6 months. It's been a busy time and there's been lots of changes and things that I know are on people's minds. I mean, for those of you with properties in Oxford City Council, obviously we've had the selective licence roll out at the end of last year and the start of this year, which has been amazingly successful. The team have done a wonderful job. Christina, Maya and all the property management team have applied for, I think, just over 400 licences on behalf of our clients. And hopefully we'll be all coming back through in the next sort of couple of months and ticked off for 5-year licenses, so that's something we don't need to worry about for another few years at least. And it was all put to bed, but they've done a great job at getting there. Obviously, there's also a lot in the media at the moment about these changes that are coming up, and one of them being the energy performance certification changes and the suggestion that by 2025, properties in the private rented sector would need to be a minimum band C. At the moment, any property that's rented is required to be a minimum band E, which obviously, apart from a few properties that are exempt, is all easily met by most of our clients. But it's quite a big jump from band E to a band C. The expectation is, and the discussions we're having with the contractors that we work with in the field, we work with some of the biggest and best firms in the area for energy performance certification. They feel it's very unlikely that 2025 date will be adhered to, will be stuck with. The reality is that the proposal was put forward, but it's never progressed. It's never been heard in Parliament. It's not been discussed. There's been no progression in the last 2 years since it was initially tabled. And we're getting to a stage now whereby there's really probably not enough time in reality to get the work done in order to get properties to that level. There's also a fundamental issue with the energy performance framework, and they all feel exactly the same way in that respect, in that the way that the rating system works at the moment is it actually downgrades electric heating. So the best possible scenario as far as an EPC goes at the moment is gas central heating. And obviously the government's planning to move away from gas central heating and encourage properties to be built with electric heating. But the framework for EPCs hasn't been updated in that respect. So currently, if you install an electric boiler over a gas boiler, you will lose points. And the same as if you have, air source heat pumps or any other type of electric heating will not grade as well as gas heating. And that has to change. That really has to change prior to these deadlines and these targets being set in stone. So really, my best advice at the moment is kind of hold fast. Certainly if there's loft insulation that can be installed or energy efficient light bulbs and simple changes like that, it's sensible to make them. But it's probably best not to go down the route of making any substantial investments into these things, because until we know the targets and until we know the framework we're going to be working to, you could end up in a situation where you've gone down the wrong route. The other thing as well is there are thresholds for exemption, and there's no suggestion in what's been tabled so far that will change. So at the moment, the suggestion is that basically you'll need to spend up to a certain capped level, so £3,000, and if it goes over that level in order to achieve a higher grade or in order to achieve a band C, you would be able to apply for an exemption for 5 years. And the way it works is it's an accumulative total. So if on your EPC statement it says loft insulation, replacing the 2 remaining single glaze for double glazed windows, and then the next thing is solar panels. The reality is the first 2 you'll probably need to do because they'll come in under 3,000. But as soon as you get a quote through that takes it over that level, we need to get 3 quotes through, but we can then apply for an exemption certificate to give you 5 years whereby you're not needing to meet that level, and you can show that it's not cost effective to do that. Certainly talk to your property managers about it if it's something of concern, but I would suggest just to hold fire at the moment, because we'll see how things play out over the next couple of years, or hopefully over the next year, as things become clearer in terms of targets, in terms of what needs to be done. And the other thing, obviously, I wanted to quickly talk about, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, is the Rent Reform Act. An awful lot in the newspapers at the moment and in the media about it. It is quite a substantial change to the regulation and to the kind of the way that agencies work and that renting properties works in the UK. A few kind of key takeaways. Firstly, The main part of it, and the bit that seems to be getting most coverage at the moment, is the abolishment of Section 21. And I think this is very likely to happen. I think, even though it's not got to a stage yet whereby anything's set in stone, I think that out of all of the parts of the Rent Reform Act, the abolishment of Section 21 is the one thing which has been constantly part of the kind of pledges for the Conservatives right from the start. So I think it's very, very likely that will go through. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding as to how that will impact landlords. Most landlords, it will really not impact your business models at all. Landlords generally only want to get rid of tenants that are causing problems, or that when they've got a requirement to do so. And so for most landlords, and I speak from quite a lot of experience, it really will not have impacted the way we'd have worked over the last 20 years. Essentially, if you're wanting to take the property back because you've got family members wanting to move in there, or if you want to sell the property, or if the tenant's in breach of contract and or falls behind with their rent by more than 2 months, or most scenarios will still be covered under a different approach to court to get a tenant out in that situation. So you can still serve notice to bring the tenancy to an end if you wanted to sell it, or if you wanted to move in there yourself, or if your tenant got in arrears. What it will stop is essentially what they call no fault evictions. So in a situation where you've got a tenant who's paying the rent, not causing any sort of particular breaches in contract, and you don't want to move in there, you don't want to sell it, but you just quite like that tenant out, that will become harder. And inevitably those sort of situations from time to time might arise, whereby we've had conversations with landlords, but essentially I feel like that's our role in being there for you, and having those conversations, making sure we can manage that relationship between the tenant and you, and we're your intermediate in terms of having those conversations and making sure we're really picky with who we put in the properties. Luckily we work in markets whereby we have great choice of tenants, and we can make sure we're getting really great tenants who are lovely to work with and look after properties and pay their rents on time, and 99.9% of the time that's what happens. So I'd encourage you not to be too concerned by the removal of Section 21. I don't think it will have too much impact on many of you at all. The other parts of the Rent Reform Act that again are getting quite a lot of press are the kind of movement towards periodic, a longer term tenancy, whereby there's no fixed period of time. Again, for most landlords renting to families or to professionals, again, it won't probably make a huge amount of difference. What it will probably mean is we may lose the ability to keep tenancies coming up in a summer to summer cycle, as we do in kind of Oxford, maybe not so much in Tame, but we kind of academic calendar and hospital employment, we can kind of try and coordinate tenancies to come up at certain times of year. That will become harder. But the one area of the market that would be affected quite significantly would be the student market, because the reality is that for student lettings, most properties are rented on a 12-month basis, and they cover year-to-year cycles. If the legislation goes through the way it was initially proposed, what this would mean is that tenants essentially could bring the tenancies to an end at the end of the summer, and then they could then decide then if they want to rent, they can rent and try and push it as late as possible. So rent from essentially September through to end of May, rather than having a 12-month contract. This hasn't gone unnoticed. So as soon as the white paper was released last year, there was lobbying from Property Mark, from a lot of the NUS has even got involved in it, suggesting this is not sensible, because what it will do is put too much pressure on the stock that's available to students, because landlords won't want that type of tenant, because it will leave them in a situation whereby they may have their properties empty for a chunk of the summer. On the back of that, there's already been talk in the papers about the fact there's going to be an amendment suggesting a change to cover student or HMO lettings. I have my fingers crossed that will come to something. We'll keep you posted, obviously, as that becomes clearer. But again, that's the one area whereby it could be quite disruptive. But it is the one area that right from last year, sort of October, November time, there was already a lot of discussion about the fact this won't work. So by the time it got to Parliament, it hadn't been amended yet because they were waiting for the discussion to happen. But subsequently, 2 or 3 days after Parliament, there was already discussions in the papers about the fact there was likely or possibly going to be an amendment to that to discourage landlords from thinking this makes student lettings not work. So I would hold fire on making any kind of, I don't think there's any strategic changes that we can make at this stage. The reality is that particularly in the Oxford market, there's an awfully good professional shared HMO market anyway. So, a lot of our clients that let to professional sharers or postgraduates, I don't think really would be as affected anyway, because unlike undergraduate students, the tenants are less likely to want to go home at Christmas and less likely to want to, not Christmas, at the end of the academic year, because they're a little bit more grown up and they're more likely to want to stay with their friends and work or study or research or whatever it is they're doing. But for undergraduate student lettings, it could be quite disruptive. But as I say, hopefully, and certainly in the papers, there seems to be big suggestion that that's coming. There will be an amendment that will allow for an exemption from those rules for student or HMO lettings. So we'll keep you posted. Hopefully there'll be some more news on that soon. As I say, with all of this stuff, we're here to talk. So if ever you've got any questions or you'd like to speak to anyone, obviously you can talk to your property managers, but you can also feel free to give me a call. I'm very, very happy to have a conversation with you and talk through any of your concerns. We've been speaking to Property Mark, who are our kind of industry body, right from when the white paper on the Rent Reform Act was released. And so, we've been part of the encouragement of pushback, particularly around student lettings, to try and find a way through that causes as little disruption as possible in the market. The positive news is, that we're unprecedented in terms of demand for rental in Oxford. Really, really great demand, great quality tenants. The housing stock for families and couples and professional singles that's coming on the market is getting snapped up, and rents are certainly being pushed up. So hopefully that'll counter some of the impact of the cost of selective licensing, but along that, also the cost of interest rates increasing with your mortgage payments. So I think that certainly in terms of the market and the kind of the buoyancy of the market, it seems very, very strong. And given we work in a market whereby there is a surplus of really good quality tenants, my expectation is that we will continue to be able to find you great quality tenants to look after your properties for many years to come, and hopefully keep the rents going up to make it all work out and make sense for you. But as I say, always happy to have a chat, always happy to to talk through any concerns you might have. I hope you enjoyed the newsletter that we're sending out today. Do get in touch if there's anything else we can do to help, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with you and answering any questions you may have in the future. Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.